Organizations' internal networks are overly permissive and can't distinguish trusted from untrusted applications. Attackers abuse this condition to move laterally through networks, bypassing address-based controls to spread malware. Edgewise abstracts security policies away from traditional network controls that rely on IP addresses, ports, and protocols, and instead ties controls directly to applications. Edgewise allows organizations to analyze the network attack surface and segment workloads based on the software and how it's communicating. Edgewise monitors applications and protects data paths using zero-trust segmentation. Visit edgewise.net/securityweekly to get your free month of visibility. Some restrictions apply. Are you an enterprise dissatisfied with overpriced analytics software that can't keep up with modern data? If so, then GravWell is the solution for you. GravWell is an unstructured data analytics platform for enterprises who demand total data visibility across their network. GravWell lets your security team go beyond the SIM and fuse data sources to correlate and answer questions you didn't know needed to be asked. Go to gravwell.io/securityweekly for an unlimited data trial and gain uncompromising visibility today. Endgame's converged endpoint security platform is transforming security programs, their people, processes, and technology with the most powerful endpoint protection and simplest user experience, ensuring analysts of any skill level can stop targeted attacks before information theft. Endgame unifies prevention, detection, and threat hunting to stop known and unknown attacker behaviors at scale with a single agent. For more information, visit endgame.com.
Some of you told us that you are overwhelmed by the amount of content we distribute. In an attempt to make it a little easier for you to find what you're interested in, we've created our new listener interest list. I have to read slow. Sign up for the list and select your interests by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe and clicking the button to join the list. You can also now submit your suggestions for guests in our recently released guest suggestion form. Go to securityweekly.com/wait for it guests and enter your suggestions. On this segment, how does DNS fit into your security architecture? Justin Murphy skied in to join us from Cisco. He's a consulting systems engineer for cloud security and has over 10 years of experience in networking and security. Justin, thank you for joining us.
Evening. Thank you for having me.
See, there's skis there. I told you.
That's right.
Doug, I just got to jump in here, but that intro sounded sleazy and slightly perverted, and I really loved it.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was going for. Sort of a little smarmy, oily, and a whole bunch of sleazy, perverted. So I was
pretty much during the break, you said, "Watch this. I'm going to turn on Joff."
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I was like, that was the whole thing. It was like, it's called the Joff. Boing. Yeah.
I was just going to say your lips were moving while you were reading.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what Jeff was focused on.
Let's get back to doing
Thanks, Justin, for being tolerant. So, Justin, how did you get into information security?
It had always been I'd always been interested in technology, and even through high school and middle school, I was working with anything I can get my hands on, anything anybody threw away, I would just play with and build out and try to figure out. And so I just followed that passion into the IT and security field, starting out mostly in network security. Actually, starting out in desktop support, really, and laptop repair and things like that. But really took off when I went into the network engineering.
How long ago did you get like Ciscofied or whatever they call that? I'm sure they have a kind of term for it.
Is that a word now?
Well,
it is now.
So I've been with Cisco for about 2.5 years, but I've been certified and inside following them for probably more than 10 years, probably 12, 14 years, going through and getting those certs and getting qualifications to be able to get into the field.
Okay. So you want to talk about DNS and the security architecture? Why that? Where did that come from? Is that your interest?
Well, yeah. So there's two reasons. One is that's actually part of my job is cloud security and the cover a product called Umbrella that works to to that end to provide security at the DNS layer. But also it's a hot topic in the news today, right? We've got DNS espionage that's had 2 different flavors out there, and Sea Turtle that's the most recent attack that's been successful on the DNS architecture. On top of it, it's something that's often overlooked as a potential visibility and protection point in organizations. And most of the customers I talk to haven't considered or do not have another method in place to monitor DNS. It's just something that you set, forget, and everybody just assumes that it's going to work in the background.
Well, yeah, but I mean, well, okay, but I mean, what do you think's being done on just like, let's just say like on the public infrastructure side, so like authoritative, to like start preventing these attacks? So there's several different slices of this we have to talk about. So let's just start with the authoritative, since that makes kind of logical sense.
Right, and that's actually where some of the attacks are focused, right? And what's really interesting on those is that it's not the fact that DNS is on its head insecure. It has to be trusted across the internet just to be able to function. But these attacks were really leveraging old attack methods like stealing credentials and CVEs that have been patched up to 2 or more years ago on common architectures and things like that to be able to just gain access into the server. And so once your server or your service is compromised, you can't. There's nothing that you could institute at the DNS level to defend against it. So really practicing proper security practices and hygiene is one of the things. So 2-factor authentication, patching your gear and things like that will help. And then on top of that, DNSSEC is absolutely something that needs to be adopted. I think.
Sorry. I figured you were going to say that eventually, but I was like, it's like, how long can we go with that coming up? But
Right, and it is something that did help protect one of the targets of DNS espionage. They had instituted DNSSEC across their architecture, and it protected most of their users. There were only 2 that were compromised, and they ended up being, and that was because they were forced to use some hotel DNS servers as opposed to the protected DNS services that they had subscribed to. So that absolutely is a method, but if you look at what Sea Turtle was able to accomplish, those groups could very well be using DNSSEC, but they own the servers, so they can publish new certs, or they could redirect them and create their own public.
Yeah.
And,
so let me redirect that question a little bit, because I would completely agree with you. And anytime that, I mean, I've always said anytime you have a physical compromise, you're just done. I mean, I don't care what you do. Absolutely. But what can you do on the other end of that to validate these authoritative servers? I mean, I'm relying on them. So is there any way I can tell they've been compromised? I mean, is there any kind of mechanism for that? There may not be. I don't really know.
Well, in the case of the actual server being compromised, there really is no way to do it to prevent it, right? To prevent your users from going there. You can retroactively detect it through passive DNS logs, basically looking at when IP addresses were changed and having threat researchers or threat research intelligence that tells you what those IPs were and when they were accessed or accessible by your users. And then you can use a service called or the groups can use a service called you can monitor certificates by using certificate transparency logs, so that you can tell if those certificates have changed recently.
Right. I mean, and that still doesn't protect you though if you're connecting to like really old. And I'm going to ask you this question because it drives Paul crazy. Is it BIND or bind?
I say bind. It's bind.
God damn it.
How do you get BIND out of that?
I've actually, yeah.
BIN with a D on the end of it.
Why isn't it bind?
I don't know.
Okay, just asking. Because I always thought it was but-ind.
But-int?
Yeah, ind.
Oh, but-ind?
Right.
Okay. Well, I always said BIND.
Did I ever tell you guys that you're full of shit? It's bind. Come on.
Yeah.
You did.
Bind.
Yes,
go back to your drinking there, Jeff. Yeah.
You know why it's blind? I could tell you authoritatively because I had a beer with Paul Vixie last year.
Okay.
I'm telling you.
Alcohol wins every time. Okay, I just had to throw it out there because it's just my little thing. I'm sorry, but I mean, all those old. If you run into these old authoritatives that are still sitting around out there that aren't patched, I mean, those things can just inject, like crazy. I mean, and I don't know how you ever get to the point where they're all cleaned up. I mean, it's always gonna be a sliding scale, right?
Yeah, and that's. I mean, I feel like that's how all security topics, like when you're talking about being able to institute two-factor, right? Well, some of our servers won't accept two-factor. There's no way we can implement it, and we're not going to change it. So there's always going to be gaps. But I think that at the root level, at the TLD, and at the more common and active services that are out there, they're absolutely going to continue to update and start protecting.
Of course. I always see that weakest link problem, and you're right. It's always it doesn't matter what the security problem. It's always going to be like that. There's just takes that one old Windows NT 4.0 box sitting out there, and everything goes down the drain. But
right.
Do you think though that like DNSSEC is going to be implemented across this and be available to us anytime soon, or is that something that's just still out there on that cyber horizon somewhere?
I definitely think that there's been activity since DNS espionage and its attention has been brought to it, but I think that it's going to continue to be something that's that unfortunately people are going to leave on the back burner, right? It's always something that that'd be nice to have, but it's a pain to implement. You've got to worry now about you're getting certificates for everything that you're resolving. You've got to worry about whether and you always still have to fall back on just straight up DNS, right? Because you can't break the internet for people. You can't break their resolution. So I think there's going to be a gap for a very long time with that, and the best you can do is implement it yourself, and for validation as well as DNSSEC on your authoritative.
Well, yeah, I actually just built I built a kind of little landscape model of it, and I was just testing it because one of the questions I got was, how much of a hog is it? How much bigger is that than my regular DNS, and how much is it going to slow down people using this and using that? And I had struggles with it just on my I threw a whole bunch of stuff in there because I wanted to get a good feel for it. So I was throwing in old Linux servers, and I was throwing in Linux workstations, and I was throwing in Windows XP and all kinds of stuff in there, and I actually found it to be a bit of a burden on the, I mean, it wasn't huge, but it was just kind of complicated, and some stuff didn't support it, and then it rolled back, which was my immediately I mean, you put security in, and all you have to do to get around it is just not talk to it, and it rolled back onto the
Right. And so, so there needs to be a mechanism there that if DNSSEC is implemented for the authoritative, that you remember that the DNS, right, your validation remembers that, and the next time if it doesn't get validated, then you know that something strange is happening.
I'm a little confused because I think Doug's full of it. I mean, because honestly, I mean, I love him and everything, but I'm running a bind resolver on my network, and it's got DNSSEC turned on, and I've got all my zones signed, and it's not a big deal, to be honest. So yeah, Doug, explain yourself, man. I mean, come on.
Well, okay. So A, this was a while ago. B, it was just a test model. I was actually trying to make it not work because I wanted to see what the worst case was. It wasn't a production network. I was throwing stuff in there, just trying to see how it interacted. And it seemed like I didn't decide that it was impossible, that it was problematic, as much as it just seemed to have some, it wasn't as nice and clean as just running a straight up old-fashioned DNS as you would expect. So my client just wanted some assessment of it. It wasn't a conclusive thing like, this is a bad idea. It was just sort of a test.
Yeah.
My eyes are up here, Jeff. Up here.
I'm sorry. I'm too busily focused on the opening statement about your left testicle. But anyway.
Oh, I know what you're looking at.
That notwithstanding, why don't we go back to asking Justin a few more questions?
So I I had a question.
Okay, Lee.
We beyond. I mean, obviously, getting the two-factor is really important, and patching bind and DNSSEC. But is there anything in there in your why the hell don't they just do this box beyond those three? Or are those the big ones?
Those are the big ones we have. Most registrars allow you to put in registry lock. That's something that you can do that will prevent others from updating your record, because you add a second validation anytime your registry changes. So I think that the registrars are putting in controls, and you just have to leverage them at this point. And I think that there's going to continue to be technology that comes out to help protect us from hijacking, but I just don't see where that fits or how that's going to look. Because again, if your actual server is compromised, what do you do? Is it something where you subscribe to a service that has like smart cache that remembers the last IP and goes invalid, and you make that cache that's there, if that changes, that you have to validate that, and what kind of overhead is that going to create, and what kind of disruption is that going to create in your network? Because there's really it's just really difficult to protect against somebody's authoritative server being compromised.
I think in that scenario, you're bringing Doug's network to its knees, if I'm tracking.
If not Doug.
Something you said remind me, is there I can't quite remember all of it. Is there a movement to do like DNS over TLS, and is that worth anything?
So yeah.
Or am I misremembering?
Oh, so God, yeah, that's over HTTPS, and yeah, that is. I think Firefox was sort of the first to put that process out there, and there's a couple, or probably a handful of services that will provide that to you. But it's you run into the same issue as anything else. You have to trust that service, and if they're providing a recursive service, then they have to trust where they're getting their answer from. So it helps with encrypting your data, and it helps with ensuring that you're getting the answer from a source that you trust. But all
right, Jay,
lose vulnerability there.
Jason, I got to jump in there. I just have to say, just to offer not really a counter opinion. I think you were almost going there. I think DNS over HTTPS is the worst damn idea ever invented. I think it is a total violation of the DNS distributed protocol. I think it's the thing that nobody should ever do. And I'm you know what? Again, this was a Paul Vixie conversation. I'm right in line with him. I think it's the stupidest thing ever.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that it's causing a lot of challenges within organizations, right? Because they're used to seeing DNS over UDP 53. And it's a known protocol, and once you start putting it over HTTPS, it becomes a problem, and for monitoring, for protection, for everything that we've been trying to do to be able to secure our networks. And so
you're right, and here's the other thing, right? Not only does it violate all that stuff, you're trusting your resolution to an upstream resolver by saying it over TLS, and then they know you got leakage, right? They know much more about you. It's just the same as people using 8.8.8.8 for DNS. Stupidest idea ever. You run your own damn DNS server in your network. That's what you need to do, right? Okay, soapbox off.
But isn't that why we have the cloud, John?
Well,
so we don't have to do that anymore and don't have to think.
But it still comes back to trust, right?
Right.
I mean, you can run your own DNS, but you have to trust somebody somewhere. I mean, you don't have the whole world, so I still, at some point, I got to go to an authoritative server and get that information. And I'm not arguing in favor of HTTPS. I'm just saying that even if you run your own DNS, you get away from 8.8.8.8, you're still trusting somebody somewhere.
Well, you're trusting the root hints file is what you're trusting. You're trusting that the people that run the DNS at the root of the internet know what they're doing, and they're doing it right. Well, if we can't trust that, we can't trust the internet's going to work at all. So at that point, game over. Anyway, back to Justin.
Right. So pointing directly at root would be an option to get that information, and then you're at that point you're just trusting the authoritative, just like your recursive service would.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask that question. I mean, do you think you should get away from trusting recursives and just go straight to the authoritative servers and run your own that goes straight there and get away from that? I mean, is that?
It depends on the recursive service and really what sort of privacy policy they have and what they can provide to you. When you're looking at recursive services, you want to look at things like, do they provide you something with either DNSSEC or DNS crypt? Do they provide you with additional logging or intelligence behind that DNS query? And that gets more into the visibility that DNS provides that organizations aren't leveraging. Because when you look at just malicious software, about 92%, and I'll probably get fried for percentages, but 92% of malicious content leverage DNS at some point. If you look at DNS espionage, I'm going to keep going back to that. They leverage DNS. Regardless of what they're doing, and that was identified at first by Talos and their blog post and our threat researchers. And so that's something that will continue to be the case as long as we have DNS, and that's how we're interacting with it. And if you look at users, they're using DNS for pretty much everything through their app, through their web browser. And so you get a huge amount of visibility. And if you got intelligence to be able to classify that traffic as well and provide and apply policy on it, then you've really got something that can be an added layer and can help prevent some of this malicious activity in your environment and help contain anything that may be infected.
Okay, well, so in light of all that, and the mention of the cloud, so one of the things I run into, and I mean, I will admit I'm ignorant about it, but I built it anyway, which is, of course, where all security problems start, was, I have cloud stuff, I have local stuff, so it's hybrid. And, basically what was being advocated was that you put DNS in your domains or whatever locally to whatever's closest, because that keeps it fast. And then the way I built mine was sort of in line with Joff's, was that it all comes back to a central, my authoritative, which then goes up to an authoritative and comes back down. Is that what you should be doing, or is there something else?
If you can, if those provide you with logging and with categorization and information on those DNS queries, then those could be enough. But in my experience, when that happens, you just have and you do log it, you just have a massive DNS queries that really you would have to push to a SIM that has something behind it as well. So you can build out that infrastructure yourself, just like anything that's either built in the cloud via services, whether it be Cisco's umbrella or somebody else's. You can do it yourself and piece it all together, or you can leverage somebody else's that's already in place.
Yeah, and so the second part of that question then was, how do I manage that in my SIM? I mean, I know how it technically works, but I mean, it just seems like this massive volume of stuff is going to hit my people who are already trying to deal with all the, and I know some people work for these giant companies, but a lot of my clients were small. They don't have huge staffs. That person's doing 5 other tasks. And now I go, well, yeah, and I got 5 DNSs scattered around the world in our cloud sites. They're all connected back to this authoritative here on site, and then that connects up. I need you to monitor all that traffic and see if anything bad's going on. I mean, that starts, then people start giving you that look that Joff gives me all the time, but it's the same thing.
Right, and that's where recursive DNS service can help with that, right? Because if the recursive DNS service is sitting in between that query, then they can redirect you to a block page or redirect you somewhere to a sinkhole or redirect that traffic so that it doesn't actually ever resolve to that malicious IP address. If you're doing it yourself, you're right. You're going to run into just manageability of alerts, and no matter how many feeds you're taking in, you're still going to be it's all going to be reactive. You need to be able to apply policy on the proactive side and be able to prevent that resolution completely. So that would almost have to have a feedback loop where you were able to say, okay, my SIM's taking in this feed. This feed says that these domains are malicious. We need to send those to my DNS server, and my DNS server needs to redirect them to my internal block page or to a block page that I host, so that they can't ever resolve to what the authoritative says that they're supposed to be.
And yeah, so in that model, it's pretty easy to automate that kind of thing when you're just getting back these block domains and doing that. Yeah, so I was thinking more about like active stuff that's not as well known, and it's just like, am I seeing certain behaviors that I need to watch for?
So there are ways that you can create modeling for that. We do that in Umbrella Labs, where we're looking at the fingerprint of say a command and control traffic, and able to identify it by monitoring it through our modeling. So you would, you could build something like that, but it's when we're looking at our DNS traffic, and when we're looking at building these models, we're looking at up to about 180 billion DNS requests a day. So we're able to take and teach the algorithms and look at what the algorithms should be to be able to identify these. So the models become very accurate. So you need real volume to be able to identify active things. And actually, that brings up DNS tunneling VPN in my mind, because DNS tunneling VPN is something that's leveraged all the time, and it, again, was leveraged in DNS espionage, where they were using that to exfiltrate data. To be able to do that on the fly, you definitely need volume and to be able to identify, this one's looking up a text record. This is unusual traffic. This is unusual DNS traffic, and to be able to monitor that stream.
So is that DNS tunneling something that's available? I mean, I've looked at that again. I looked at that on my little localized thing, and I was trying to figure out a way to do that. But is that available from like authoritatives? Can you get that way? Could you do like point to point from my authoritative to another authoritative with tunneling? So I think we may be talking about two different things. DNS tunneling VPN would be if I owned a domain and I wanted to send information from an application that was on your box, it would basically be like hello.justin.com, and it would come to my server, and I would see it, and I could send it back a text record if it was asking for a text record. It's also leveraged by antiviruses. They send up hashes to their DNS servers, and they come back with benign or malicious to the application, because it's really lightweight, and they can send out a lot of queries from those devices to check all the files that are there. So it's something that they're using. But as far as like building a tunnel between authoritatives, I haven't seen that before. I don't even know that it's a threat. Yeah. It was a question somebody asked me once at a company, and they were actually talking about where the vulnerabilities lie in DNS. Just like an upper management person was asking me this, and they'd obviously read something, and it was just about the servers talking to each other. So, because you're really looking at, here's my recursive, and it's talking to my authoritative, and that's talking to another authoritative, and they were talking about people intercepting all that traffic. And I know TLS gets around that and some things like that, but there was just that's kind of where I was on that. So,
and I think DNS crypt is something that you can leverage for that kind of communication. We use it in house, and it's something that we were part of the consortium that came up with it, but it's going to it encrypts that DNS traffic, and one of the reasons we do that is because we add in AD usernames and IP addresses to enrich the logging of that DNS traffic. So you can do that, and there are protocols out there to do that. And that provides also, for us, it provides an authentication as well as encryption across the wire. So you're resolving you're at least trusting us to then make the further query. And using our intelligence to make sure that's going to be safe.
Yeah, I pulled all these questions out of like questions people had asked me over the years, where I was going, yeah, sure, I know the answer to that.
Right.
But so another one was where in that stack, from like ultimate authoritative down to recursives to more authoritatives or whatever, where in that stack do you think the greatest vulnerability actually lies? If there's the biggest threat.
So I guess you would have to look at it in different ways. The most likely compromises are going to be where we've seen on the authoritative, because those have more hands in the pot and more people running them, and people that have cycled through, and if you don't have, and I know I've seen this before, where you don't have proper hygiene, your registrar, the person who registered or the registrar's person on a file that's saying that this person is the admin of all of your domain names and everything, that person is left, and they may have left a year or two ago,
right? And
that never got updated, right? So those are going to be, I think, the most vulnerable. But I think that highest potential for just a complete collapse would be is if like the root servers or some TLDs, some large TLDs like .com, right, or were compromised, where you couldn't trust where you were going, because there would be no indication to the user that there was a problem. You would just go there, everything would resolve. You couldn't look in the browser. It wouldn't be something like a Punycode attack. It would be actually going to the site, and so that's.
I mean, you're just kind of
provide a large amount of chaos, right?
You're just kind of toast when that happens, because
right.
you're trusting that, and if it's then I don't know what to do about that. It would be bad.
Yeah, the potential there is just astronomical. Massive. But as far as whether that can whether that's how that would be feasibly compromised would be an interesting exercise.
Well, I just kind of mapped it against like the extreme nature of it, so a local compromise of just like a host file was like probably the easiest thing. So there's the most threats right there, but it doesn't affect very many people. It just affects that one machine. So unless somebody compromises your recursive, and when I saw recursives that were running other things, so we had recursives that were also acting as web servers and all kinds of other things that they were doing, I was like, well, okay, so it expands because the threat's there, but again, it doesn't affect that many people. It's just in this one little local area, so it would really be way up high as where real bad things happen when somebody walks in.
Exactly, and if you look where they went with DNS espionage and adding Kharkov to the second attack, where they actually wanted, so they weren't as easily detected and didn't leave as big a footprint, they were actually looking for specific services that were running. And so they actually wanted to affect fewer people, but they wanted to target the specific admins or people who are running the correct services for what they wanted, their either their email credentials or whatever they were looking for. So there is both directions. Like CTurtle, I know was the TLD. So that's actually at a very high level that they were compromising that. But that's just. My
last question, and I'll let you off the hook. But
sure.
So I'm not filling up my book of questions here. This one was just more fun. It was something I was thinking about the other day. Was like, is there some other thing that you can think of that is going to replace DNS someday? I mean, DNS is very old. I mean, it's a very old concept. I know we've modified it and we've added to it, but is there something else like blockchaining, or I hate to say that word but I don't even mean.
Oh my God.
I don't even mean blockchain.
Take over hosting.
Oh, that's the last thing you want.
No, I know. I don't mean to actually blockchain. I said like a blockchain kind of idea.
Right.
That's something new and different. So is there something like that?
Like a virgin?
Can we work machine learning into DNS?
Oh,
being DOSed for the very first time?
How about AI?
I'm going to answer the question for him, but go ahead, Justin.
Well, I was going to say I don't see anything on the horizon, and I think that it would be tantamount to replacing like BGP.
There you go.
I mean, not something that is feasible at this point. And I haven't seen anything. But Jeff, do you have a?
Well, even better said, this is Joff, not Jeff, because we don't give Jeff an opinion. DNS is one of the most scalable and resilient protocols the internet has ever seen. It's tried and tested. I cannot see it going away. In fact, in my opinion, I think we will see more data entering the DNS for more uses because of its scalability in the future.
Yeah, and then the antivirus utilization of it is a perfect example of that expanding use.
I completely agree. I mean, that was the answer I gave to the question when they asked me that was like, this is one of the most resilient things out there, and despite some little quirks here and there, it's been around, it's been tested, it's not that complicated. Why make it worse? And
why didn't you say that initially instead of bring up blockchain?
It said
just to set you up,
blockchain,
Jeff.
Just because that's another.
To entertain.
I know. I set everybody off with that, but it's shock night here.
Awake.
So somebody.
Okay, I got to ask a quick question, Doug, because somebody else hasn't. We've had mentions of DNS espionage throughout the segment. Would you expand on that a little bit for us, Justin?
So,
like what exactly are you talking about? In case any of our listeners or hosts may not be familiar with it.
So DNS espionage was an attack that happened towards the end of 2018, the beginning of 2019, or that's when it was identified. And it was an attack on a couple registrars. They were compromised so that to gain credentials of email. Of folks' email addresses. So basically, what they did was they would establish a presence on the box, and they had in one case they had actually turned off DNSSEC for their mail servers to generate their own certs, and so that they could later attack. What they didn't do was what messed that attack up was they turned DNSSEC back on, and that broke their attack. But in one case, the DNSSEC wasn't available, wasn't turned on, and so they were able to have a successful attack without any sort of authentication, because those hosts would basically get redirected to the malicious mail servers. It would authenticate them, and then it would send them where they were supposed to go. So
you're saying that they actually in the process of the attack, they compromised the DNS records themselves and redirected the lookups to alternative
to malicious servers, right, to their malicious architecture, and then that architecture, just so the user didn't know that they were compromised, would just send them where they wanted to go. And so the only indication that there was a problem was that they were there was a delay in authentication.
Right. So it actually speaks, in my opinion, that speaks to the value of DNSSEC. Yes, that one does, absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. No. I believe it was PCH was the one that had DNSSEC, and the only reason they lost a couple some of their credentials was because of the hotel DNS that was provided wasn't their service that they were subscribed to, and wasn't using DNSSEC. Absolutely.
So the DNSSEC effort, for everybody that doesn't know, was a marathon effort by Dan Kaminsky in the community that took many, many years and to permeate and get the keys actually distributed out all the way out to root servers. So I think we owe Dan a lot of credit for that, because I think it's working. Although it increased the message size, it did increase the operational load. I think DNSSEC was a worthwhile penalty to incur for the additional security that we get.
I agree. I mean, I ran DNSSEC on another test lab, and it didn't seem that bad to me. I mean, I think it was perfectly reasonable. So I agree.
Yeah. For those who are not aware, a few years back when you were implementing DNSSEC, you actually had to do what they called look-aside validation. And DNSSEC look-aside validation means you actually had to configure a special line in your DNSSEC resolver that actually talked to ISC, Internet Software Consortium, because the original DNSSEC it hadn't propagated the trust model all the way up to the roots. So look-aside validation was required for dealing with the validating the chain of trust until the roots were signed, and finally the roots got signed not so many years ago, which is it's a great effort.
Yeah. All right. Justin, I got 5 questions from Security Weekly that everybody gets to ask, so I'm going to ask them to you, if that's okay.
Excellent. Yeah,
all right.
No worries.
First question is, choose 3 words to describe yourself.
You're going to stump me on the first one.
Uh-oh. And you have
Think
to turn
initials.
Don't think too much, Justin. Don't think too much. Just go with the gut.
Just first thing comes to your mind, even if it's incredibly obscene.
Skier.
That's right. Bearded tinker and curious.
Oh, there you go. See, that was all right. How about if you were a serial killer, what would your weapon of choice be?
Ooh.
Skis.
That's right, skis. We'll go with we'll stay relevant to the time. We'll be a Valyrian steel dagger.
Ooh.
Oh boy.
I thought you were going to say
very
DNSSEC, but that's
Use
okay.
the Oathkeeper.
That's right.
Drown them in DNSSEC packets. If you wrote a book about yourself, what would the title be?
Why would you read this?
Yeah, okay, that's good. I like that's excellent. Yeah,
That is the best answer I've heard
that's
all year.
really, really good. Yeah, I like that a lot. I'm going to steal that.
Touche.
In the popular game of Ask Grabby Grabby, would you choose to go first or second?
First.
Okay. See, it's all.
He's sticking with the European rules.
Yeah, he is.
That's
It's
right.
European rules all the way. Okay. All right. I'm going to let Jeff ask this one because he likes the one about.
No, I'll do the postlude.
Okay.
Jeff can ask the
Okay.
question.
Well,
Okay.
choose two celebrities, living, dead, or what was it, Jeff?
Oh, God,
Alive,
no.
dead,
Alive,
fictional,
dead,
or
fictional,
otherwise?
You just say characters.
Hey,
Or
let
not
me
does
just
the
ask-
rest.
Let me just ask the whole question.
That's what I tried to start with.
Choose two people to be your parents, alive, dead, fictional, or otherwise.
So we'll go with Chris Pratt and April Ludgate.
There you go. Why not? That's good.
You have
Yeah.
a winner.
All right. Well, thank you, Justin Murphy, for joining us and talking about DNS on Paul's Security Weekly.
All right.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This has been great.
lots of fun. All right. So we'll see you in the next news segment. Hang around.